This is the Highly Sensitive Club, episode number 36.
Have you been told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, or too much? Do you have big feelings and deep thoughts you don't always know what to do with? I'm Stephanie Lynn, a certified life coach and highly sensitive person. I've helped dozens of highly sensitive clients feel more energized, more confident, and more in control of their high sensitivity. In these episodes, you'll get the information and inspiration to level up your life as a highly sensitive person too. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Club.
Hello, highly sensitive person, and welcome to this week's episode of the Highly Sensitive Club. I am very excited to have my friend and colleague Nikki Smith on with me today. Nikki is a death doula, which you don't see very many of those out in the wild, so I'm so excited to have her on today. And I will just pass it to you, Nikki, to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your business.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. I'm a death doula, and I have been at this for a little over 3 years now. Death doulas provide non-medical support for the dying and to their loved ones. There's a million different ways I can describe it. If I sat here and listed all the things we do, it would take all day. But the most succinct way I can say is we're providing that non-medical support. We fill in some of the gaps where a lot of the other programs you are familiar with at end of life give off. Like a lot of people are on hospice at end of life, which I always highly recommend. Hospice is an amazing service. However, a lot of their teams can only come in twice a week for an hour or two, and they don't have that extra time to spend really working through the deep emotional work with people at end of life and making sure that they're making their informed decisions and having things go exactly how they want it to go. I want everybody to have the end of life experience that they want and deserve.
I think that's really beautiful because not everyone gets to have the experience that they want, or they don't have close people that can come and be with them. I can't imagine a better person to have come and be with me at the end of life than you, because you have the perfect mix of being very empathetic and sensitive and also hilarious.
Thank you. I do pride myself on my sense of humor, which I'm also really good at reading the room. I know when I'm with that family that might not have the same sense of humor as me, and I can turn that off if I need to. But I'm absolutely willing to have that sense of humor because not every moment of end of life has to be so sad. It doesn't have to be serious. And if it were me, I want people telling jokes and laughing and having a good time around me. I mean, people will cry, and that's just how it is. You know, that's fine. But I would hope people would be having fun too and laughing. I always say if my funeral is not a roast, then my friends don't really know me.
Yeah. How did you find out that you were a highly sensitive person?
I had not really heard the term until probably a few years ago, but I've been told throughout my childhood, adolescence, and even early adulthood, like, you're just too sensitive. Stop taking things so personally, and why are you so upset? I can remember a very specific incident. I was with my mom at a farmer's market, and we were out in the country, and this lady was trying to turn left into the farmer's market and didn't see somebody coming, and they hit her, T-boned her. And they had to call the squad and everything. And I was so upset. I couldn't stop crying. I took on a lot of those feelings and those emotions of everybody around me.
I think you're describing a very common experience for highly sensitive people, which is I'm experiencing an emotional reaction that feels much more intense than the people around me. And I might be getting judgment for that. I might be getting some confusion for that. People might be going about their day, but inside you're having this very intense, acute experience.
Yeah. My background is in theater and performing arts. And I think part of what drew me to that and why I loved it so much was I understood emotions, I feel like, better than most people around me, and all the different types of reactions to emotional events.
That empathy and that depth of emotion can really come in handy, even though it feels very intense.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And that's why I feel like it was such a natural progression to move into doing death doula work. I haven't died before. Spoiler. I am, in fact, still alive right now. But I have witnessed, so many people go through end of life now. And I've known people in my own personal life before this that have died or experienced cancer or terminal diagnoses. And I've seen all the different reactions and all the different emotions wrapped up in end of life. And I just feel like I have a really good understanding of them.
One of the things that I talk to my highly sensitive people about the most is having capacity and building capacity for uncomfortable emotions. Because we do feel so intensely and we do have this very rich inner world. So things like grief, which is an umbrella for many, many uncomfortable emotions, can feel very scary or intimidating for a lot of highly sensitive people. Tell me a little bit more about your experience with grief, with you, with your clients, and what that feels like as a highly sensitive person.
I also went through a training to be a grief coach, which kind of falls under the umbrella of my end of life work, but I also work with people who have experienced a loss, even if I wasn't present for that loss. My own journey with that, I lost my brother in 2015 rather unexpectedly. A couple friends died unexpectedly, another friend had cancer, and it was just all these losses concurrently happening, especially with my brother's loss. I didn't process that grief. And I felt like I didn't have that place to, because there's a whole thing around sibling loss. I was looking out for my parents. They lost their only son, and he had 2 kids. They lost their dad. I felt like I don't need to grieve. This isn't my place. This is their loss. It never occurred to me to process my loss with that. Years later, it came back and bit me in the butt, and I had a bit of a mental breakdown with that. And with all of these things, it helps solidify that there's no proper way to grieve other than to grieve. You have to face it. You have to do it. And then in working with clients, I've heard a lot of things that I felt myself say too, like, I don't think I'm grieving right. There's no right or wrong way to grieve, or I should be over this by now. And that's I hate that one, because you never really get over your grief. It changes over time, but grief's still there. I still mourn my brother's loss every day. I still think about him every day, and some of the other losses I've had as well. I think about them all the time, and that's not going to change. That's not going to go away.
Grief for those who are still around can look any number of ways and last forever. It doesn't necessarily have to be linear.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that.
Agree. And anger is not bad, right? Anger is just an expression of fear, typically. Oh, of course it's okay to be angry, especially if it's been an unexpected loss, because you had all this future with this person in your life and they're not there now, and everything's changed. Whoever that person may be it a sibling, a partner, a friend, you've always just had them there, and you have these thoughts of them being there tomorrow and the next day and the next day and next Christmas. And now you don't. They're gone. Of course it's okay to be angry. I'm angry all the time that my brother died so young. He was only 40. He didn't get to walk his daughter down the aisle at her wedding. And I was so angry about that. That's okay.
I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of people can resonate with that feeling that I'm not doing it right, or I should be over this, that certain emotions don't feel okay to feel, that you don't think you have any right to them, or you're not justified for them. What is the power that you find as someone who does this professionally, being with those uncomfortable emotions and working through them rather than trying to ignore them or suppress them or work around them?
Giving my clients permission to feel those feelings, and not just feel them, but acknowledge them and embrace them, is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. As I see that expression on their face, or I see them realize, oh my God, she's right. I can be angry. This is okay. And I'm not going crazy. Or people have unexpected reactions where they're joyful or happy or feel relief. Relief is a big one. I get a lot, like, I'm relieved. Isn't that bad? Nope. No, it's not. Not at all. If somebody was very sick for a long period of time, if you were a caregiver, that's so much work. Yeah, you're going to feel relief when they're gone. That doesn't mean you didn't love them. That doesn't mean you don't hurt. That one thing you don't have to have in your life anymore is the hard part of their end of life. And that's perfectly valid to feel relief.
Especially if you experience a lot of pain or suffering because the person that you love is experiencing a lot of pain or suffering. It makes perfect sense that there's some relief that comes up with that.
I've spoken with a lot of people who have experienced losses due to overdose or suicide or addiction, things like that. And that's especially when the person is younger, where there's an unexpected feeling to it. They tell me, I'm relieved they're gone. Is that bad? I was like, no, you spent your whole life, wrapped up in the pain of their addiction with them, or whatever the experiences are. If they've been hurtful to your family, hurtful to themselves, whatever that might be. And that hurtful part of it is no longer there. So yeah, you feel relief. That is a very valid point. And it's okay if you feel relief. It does not mean that you love them any less. It doesn't minimize your love. It doesn't minimize your grief. It just mean that the icky bits are gone now. Icky bits is a technical term, by the way.
Of course. They teach you that in death doula school.
It's a term everybody understands. Everybody knows what icky means. And let me tell you, death can be real icky. A lot of what I do with my clients and their families is filling them in on what to expect as somebody is actively dying, if they are going to be present, which most people want to be with their loved ones. And I always encourage that. But to understand what might happen physically with their body, it might be very upsetting to witness. It can be very gross at times. Some people might not be comfortable with that. And that's okay. No judgment. If you don't want to be around your person and witness all that, you're perfectly allowed to leave the room.
I think that goes right along the lines with it's okay for you to feel relieved, or it's okay for you to have moments of joy.
Yeah.
It's okay for you to be uncomfortable with the physical sensations, especially as a highly sensitive person, because you're taking them in a lot more intensely than other people are. It's okay if you need to take breaks, or you need to take a step back, or you need to limit the time that you're spending with someone. And it doesn't mean that you love them any less.
Absolutely. 100%.
Since you are an improv expert, you have acting in your background, and you're a death doula, I feel like we have to tell some stories here. What are some really memorable stories that you feel comfortable sharing?
I've been doing improv comedy since 2004, I think, so 20 some years now. You can think on your feet and you can think in the moment. And be physically, but also emotionally, mentally present, like right there in the moment. The daughter of a client who her mom was in her active dying phase, and she was having what we call the death rattle. A lot of times hospice will help with the medications to stop that so you don't hear the rattling noise, but she was doing it real bad. And her daughter said, "It's just me, or she sound like a percolator." We both had a good chuckle, and I was like, well, I kind of don't want any coffee right now, but thank you. I did go to a funeral for a friend of mine. It wasn't quite a roast, but he was young, and he had more friends than anybody could count. We couldn't fit in a funeral home, so we went to the theater to have his celebration of life, and they just had an open microphone, let anybody come up and tell stories, and it was like 3.5 hours of people just sharing stories. And I sat and listened to everyone. I didn't get bored once. It was amazing.
That is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's for us who remain to be able to process through and to complete that cycle, especially when you have emotions that are just sitting in your body. Laughter can be such a great release in addition to crying.
Absolutely. I hear a lot of people in my life, not in relation to work, but on personal levels, I don't want a funeral. Please do not have a funeral. I don't want any of that. And I have to find a polite way of saying, it's about you, but it's not for you. Funerals are for the people left behind. And whether you like it or not, people are going to grieve your loss. If my funeral's a roast, I'm down with it. But I love bourbon. Everybody go out and sip some bourbon, tell some stories, sit around a campfire. That's great. You don't have to go to a funeral home. You don't have to sit and cry and listen to hymns and organ music. But everybody left behind, if that's what's going to make them feel better, go for it. I don't care, because I won't be there. It's for them, not for me. I can tell you the questions I get asked the most. Most people, 2 top questions are why I chose to become a death doula and how I could possibly do this line of work. I've been a highly sensitive person. I'm very in tune with emotions, but I've also always been passionate about helping people. I've volunteered in hospices, I worked at nursing homes, and I have just never really had much of the ick factor around death and dying. It's never really bothered me. I'm not fearful about talking about death and dying. These subjects are horrendously taboo, but I'm not afraid to talk about them. So when I heard about death doulas, I'm like, well, crap, that's everything I'm good at. I think that sounds amazing. I didn't jump on it right away because that was a long time ago I'd heard about death doulas. It was during COVID when I was stuck at home reevaluating my entire life and realized I was not happy with my life in corporate America. And I wanted to do my own thing, and I wanted to do something meaningful to me. Day 1 of training, the first hour of the training program I went through, I was like, this is where I meant to be, and this is what I meant to do. And as far as how I can possibly do this, I will say again, it just comes naturally to me. But that's not to say it's always easy, because it's not. I've had clients that I've lost that really affected me very hard. And every single client I've had, I still remember, and I always will. And they're going to sit with me right here. And there's going to be days where they're all talking a little loud and it might be too much for me. But I know how to take care of myself. I know how to quiet down the noise when I need to. And I also know how to feel my feelings and, accept that it hurts and it's parts of it suck. But I love what I do, and all the beautiful things that families can experience makes it all worthwhile.
I completely agree. What does training to become a death doula look like?
There are a ton of different trainings out there now. The one I went through was through the International End-of-Life Doula Association, or INELDA. As far as my research, they had the most robust program. It was the longest, and it had the most involved with it. We met online, live classroom over Zoom, twice a week for 4 or 5 weeks, and then on Sundays for like 6 hours, like the whole day. So it was many, many hours of training. We went over active listening and response, what to expect physically, how to watch what happens at the end of life. We had a lot of different people talking about the physical aspects of what's happening to the body, so we understand when this is happening, what it means, and that it's nothing to panic about. We went through different types of mental illness and death, dementia, and I did their certification program as well.
I can see how learning with other people who also are very open-minded and accepting of death is very powerful. But it also sounds like there are a lot of technical aspects and a lot of techniques that you use that just make you better equipped to be able to broach these topics and to talk to your clients and their families about what's going on, walk them through the process and normalize it in a way that I think a lot of people just don't take the time to do if they know to do it.
Absolutely. And I will say, I usually work in tandem with hospice, and hospice teams are always very open and accepting of me being there. They communicate with me just as much as they do the family. And a lot of times they will take the time to explain some of those things. But if they've got like 10 other patients that day and they're in a rush, they can't always just sit and hold your hands and cry with you and listen to the story about your grandson for the 50th time that week. I can do that because I don't have, 20 other clients I have to see that day. But if you have a good hospice team, they should be explaining a lot of that to you as well, for sure.
Good to know. My second question, since we circled around that one, is how do you think and feel about death?
In our Western cultures, we don't have it in our homes. We don't have multi-generational homes all living together with 3 to 4 generations around as grandma is dying. We just don't do that. Typically, they're in a facility, they're in a nursing home, they're somewhere else, and we're not exposed to it all the time. So it is a bit of a mystery to us. And having been around it more now and watching this process and other people more, it's less of a mystery. And I've always found death to be interesting and or fascinating. And now, for the most part, I find it very beautiful. Much like a birth can be just the most beautiful thing. Most people who have been through that process will tell you the birth is the most beautiful thing a human can possibly do. But watching somebody go through the end of life is just as beautiful to me. It's an honor for me to be in that space, and it's such a beautiful and sacred space and should not be taken lightly.
What makes it so beautiful and so sacred?
Well, especially around my experiences with it, loved ones are around them and they're having what they want, as far as I want to be at home, or I want this type of music playing, or I want people to be playing cards on the table next to me, or I want to be alone. That person is getting exactly what they wanted for their end of life. And if you ask any one of your friends, what would your ideal experience be? Most people would say, I want to be at home with my family, right? And to make that happen or to see that happen just makes it feel so special. It's like watching a birth. It's a very intimate moment of that, families are all together watching this person transition out of this world. And just to see that amount of love around the room. I've had one client so far who did not want anybody in the room with her as she was dying. She wanted to be completely alone. And I did the best I could, but hospice nurses are going to have to come in and out, but I will keep visitors away as much as possible. That's what she wanted. And it was beautiful, even though I couldn't watch her or be there with her, I could sit outside the room. How many people die alone in hospitals, hooked up to machines, in pain, and with nobody? I hate to think of that. And if I can make somebody's end of life more beautiful and more personal, then my job's done.
You get to help people close out their life in the way that they want. You make it happen and you make sure that they have exactly what they want. And that's really special.
If I were to tell you right now, you've got 2 days left, how many things are like, oh my God, I never told this person I love them, or I never filled out this form, or I don't know what's going to happen with my car, or there's all those things suddenly that need to be done. And to have somebody step back and say, I will call that person you need to talk to. I'll get the forms you need. We'll get those signed. We'll have all this done. And then we can just do whatever you want. If you want to sing songs, we'll sing songs. If you want to watch Grey's Anatomy, I don't care. Whatever you want to do, we're going to do it.
It makes sense that you want to be with as many people as you can be so that there are fewer people who are moving on to whatever comes next and alone or scared or angry or sad. And you get to ease that way for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't bear the thought of anybody dying alone unless that's what they really want. Like the one client I had, more power to her. That's what she wanted. So that's what I gave her. But I can't bear the thought of it. Those people, their family all lives in another state, and you don't know when it's going to happen. So they know somebody is with their person.
I have one more question for you, but is there anything that you feel called to share?
If you have not done so already, if you are over the age of 18, fill out your advance directive paperwork. If nothing else, fill out a living will. The living will is that piece of paper that says if you want life-sustaining measures, if you are in a persistent vegetative state, or if you don't want those. Fill it out for the love of Pete. If you do nothing else today, get your living will together. It is crazy easy to find online. You can fill it out for free and have it notarized. Give it to your doctor and medical team. The other thing is whatever you're feeling, your feelings are valid. Your grief is yours. Whatever you're feeling is normal and okay.
What would you recommend for families or for someone who is getting closer to death? What would you tell them at this point?
First thing I always try to get people to understand is what hospice is and what they do and what they don't do. So many people hear the word hospice and immediately they're thinking hospitals and medically stuff, and that's not what hospice is at all. It's a beautiful service that can keep you so much more comfortable at the end of your life. And the great thing about hospice is the dying person, the family are the ones in charge. If they say, I don't want any morphine, guess what? They're not going to make you take it. If you say, I only want a little bit, they'll give you just a little bit. And if you say that's too much, they'll stop, they'll ease it back. You get to make all the decisions. They're just there to make you more comfortable. And there have been studies that people who receive hospice treatment versus those who don't live an average of 3 days longer. They really improve the quality of the last days of life. Please, please, please look into it. And again, make sure you've got your paperwork filled out. If you have a lot of assets, maybe talk to an attorney. The more you can do ahead of time to prepare for that, the easier the end of life is, because nobody wants to be on their deathbed panicking over something they forgot to deal with or getting that paper. Or God forbid, mom has a stroke and now she's still alive, but can't communicate, can't sign those papers. Oh crap, what do we do? So if that paperwork is done ahead of time, that's one less headache everybody has to deal with.
Yes. So prepare as much as you can, take care of your paperwork, look into hospice care because it's not as scary as it sounds.
Absolutely.
How can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about your services or work with you?
Yeah, you can find my website is nikkithedeathdoula.com. It's spelled Nikki. I've got tons of information. I've got resources. I have a little store on there. I sell some workbooks on how to plan for end of life. So if you are not sure where to start, what to do, I've got some great workbooks that can help with that. Also a workbook on working through your grief with journaling. You can set up an introductory appointment if you feel like you would like to utilize my services, either as a doula or a grief coach, or you just want to say, hey, Nikki, it's nice to meet you. You can find me there.
Good. And tell people about your podcast.
Yes. And there's a link on my website for the podcast as well, but it's Good Grief with Nikki the Death Doula. And it's all about destigmatizing and demystifying grief and end of life and learning all about the ins and outs of what grieving is, which is whatever you want it to be.
I can highly recommend it myself as one of your listeners. I'll have all of that information in the show notes, but I think those are some good ways to get in touch with you and to learn a little bit more about your services and what you do.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you. This was fun.
Good. I'm glad. This was a very lighthearted conversation about death, so I'm glad we covered so many different topics.
Death doesn't always have to be heavy. It can be fun. You can absolutely have fun conversations about death. I encourage it.
Thanks for listening. If you're ready to take what you learned today to the next level, head over to Stephanie Lynn, that's LINN.com, and book a consultation call to get started. I can't wait to see you there, my dear HSB.